But now we have not one, not two, but 3 books worth of companions to look at. Return to Oz takes characters from both the second and third Oz books, as well as returning characters from the first Oz book. So let's start with those. For the movie, this basically just means the Scarecrow. And that's about it. That means no Pansy Tin Man, no insufferable bimbo Glinda, and no comic relief Cowardly Lion. He was actually okay in the movie. We get to see the Tin Man and the Lion, but they don't really do a whole lot, and Glinda doesn't make an appearance at all. In fact, even the Scarecrow doesn't do much. I mean, yeah, the plot is centered around his rescue, but the Scarecrow himself doesn't show up until the very end. In the Land of Oz, we get to see the Scarecrow and the Tin Man again, but not the Lion. The Lion does make an appearance in Ozma, but even then we don't see that much of him, and he doesn't do that much. And you'll recall from the Wizard of Oz review that I said that the Lion was by far the strongest companion. Now, I don't know how popular he was with fans, but he was definitely the strongest character. And he's the one we barely see. Fail. But let's look at the characters from Book 2, in this case, Jack Pumpkinhead and the Gump. Jack Pumpkinhead is a creator of Ozma, brought to life by Mombi's magical powder. Unlike the previous companions, however, Jack Pumpkinhead doesn't really have anything to contribute to the group. He doesn't have any real strengths or virtues, like the Scarecrow's intelligence or the Tin Man's axe. Plus, he falls apart easily and has weak joints. Still, in the movie he at least tries, attempting to hold the Gump together in flight, even though it means falling apart himself. In the book, he does nothing. He does absolutely nothing, except whine constantly about how he's going to spoil. In fact, Tip has to build the sawhorse specifically so that it can carry him so that his joints won't wear out. He has no purpose other than to be another creative-looking character. The Gump is created out of random elements found where our characters are being held prisoner. 2 couches, some palm leaves, a broomstick, and the head of an animal called a Gump. All tied together with twine and brought to life, again, with Mombi's magic powder. While both characters are interesting, at least from a visual standpoint, the book's character actually carries through to a natural conclusion, while the movie character is kind of forgotten about after his usefulness is expired. And I actually like the direction that the book takes. The Gump requests to be taken apart because he doesn't want to live his life as this monstrosity. He seems to be the one character who doesn't care to live as an animated thing, probably because he remembers his previous life as a proud animal. And finally, from the third book, we have Ballina the Talking Hen, who is about on the same level of likability and annoyance in both versions, though perhaps a little cleverer in the book, and Tick-Tock, who is by far the most interesting character in the first 3 Oz novels. Tick-Tock is a mechanical man. He's actually been referred to as literature's first robot, who can be wound up for thinking, speaking, and action. He is advertised as being able to do anything but live. Dorothy activates him, and he, in turn, acts as servant to her. The character is interesting for a couple of reasons, outside of being literature's first robot. First, he's a mechanical man, but he's capable of thinking for himself, provided, of course, that his thought is wound up. And in this way, the movie character is actually a little bit cleverer in the way that he figures things out, actually tricking the Gnome King into letting Dorothy in so that she can watch what he changes into. And even though this plan doesn't work, he still thinks of it, whereas in the book, it just kind of happens by chance. And the other interesting thing about this character is that, unlike the other characters, Tick-Tock has no ambitions to be anything more than what he is. The Scarecrow wants brains, the Tin Man wants a heart, Jack Pumpkinhead wants to be immortal, but Tick-Tock recognizes that he is a non-living mechanical man and he is content to remain so. It's honestly kind of refreshing to see an Oz character who's perfectly satisfied with his lot in life. Now, you could argue that this is the way that he's programmed, but remember, he's also capable of independent thought, so he must have at least thought about this. The movie Tick-Tock isn't quite as consistent with this, and to be honest, the scene where he cries for Dorothy is a little too over the top for me. But then again, I really do like the relationship that forms between them, so in the end it's kind of a toss-up which Tick-Tock I like better, as they're both great representations of the character. Of course, there are a few characters from the books that didn't make it into the movie, like the Wogglebug, who was annoying, the Hungry Tiger, who was pointless, and the Sawhorse, who was actually a good character once he got out from under Jack Pumpkinhead. I think I personally would have liked to see the Sawhorse rather than Jack Pumpkinhead in the movie, but I guess they had to go with the most memorable character, so in general I'm happy with the choices they made. I also appreciate that the companions act more like companions. In the Land of Oz especially, the characters bicker constantly. It seems like most denizens of Oz are either really easily offended or really offensive, or both, and the bickering got really tiresome. There wasn't as much in book 3, but the characters in book 2 are just so annoying that it made that book that much harder to read. But I'd be lying if I said that I didn't think that these characters were one of the main reasons why Oz became as popular as it did. These characters are unique and different, but in the land of Oz, they are accepted as people. Or animals on the same level as people, whatever the case may be. For all the arguments that these characters have, you can always sense the bond that they share for being different. Oz is a place where differences are not only accepted, but celebrated, which gives these characters widespread appeal, particularly among children. Also, one consistent feature with all of Bomb's characters is that they're all flawed in some way. The Tin Man is vain, the Wogglebug is arrogant, Jack Pumpkinhead is a whiner, and the Sawhorse isn't very bright. And while we are often annoyed at these character traits, we also recognize that, again, they are accepted as people in spite of their flaws. Bomb never sets out to create the perfect character, even in his idealized versions of Dorothy and Ozma, and he describes his characters in a very frank and objective way, so that we see their flaws, but also their virtues, and their virtues usually outweigh their flaws. And for that reason, I prefer the varied and creative characters of the books. Annoying though they often are. But what about the innovative ways that these storytellers created the magical land of Oz? I don't know why, but I really like watching 80s fantasy visual effects. I really enjoy looking at the creativity behind them. Now you can do pretty much anything with computers, and there's still a lot of creativity behind it, but to be honest, sometimes they look a little too perfect. The effects in this movie don't always look flawless, and some of them actually look kind of cheesy, but I like the gritty look that they give everything. Plus, I always get the sense that there's something there, whether it be stop motion or puppetry. In that way, it seems more real to me. As I've said numerous times, Bomb's focus is on the land and the characters. As such, his descriptions are very detailed and realistic. And naturally, there's a lot of creativity behind everything. I mean, you've got a walking scarecrow, a man with a pumpkin for a head, and a creature made out of 2 couches, a broomstick, palm branches, clothesline, and a mounted animal head. Who thinks of that? Plus, you have all the descriptions of the land of Oz itself, its various regions, and the people who live there. In the 3rd book, Bomb introduces 2 new countries, the land of Ev and the realm of the Gnome King, each with its own people and history. Now that's a lot of creativity in 2 books, and while it can be overwhelming at times, it makes the world seem that much more vivid, and Bomb's straightforward style of storytelling is very refreshing and enjoyable to read. But for all that, Bomb's books are intended to create a fairly safe world. Land of Oz has about as much conflict as the 1st book, which is to say very little. There's a little more in the 3rd book, and we definitely have a legitimate villain, but it's not what you'd call a dark series. The movie is dark. Almost everything seems sinister. Hell, even Kansas seems sinister. The movie also parallels a theme from the original movie by having characters from the land of Oz parallel characters from Kansas. In this case, the doctor and nurse from the hospital in Kansas become the Gnome King and Mombi, respectively. And they even have the squeaky wheels of the gurney become the wheelers, which I thought was kind of clever. Plus, maybe it's a little creepy of me, but I just love seeing Oz destroyed. I really like seeing things that shake our perception of reality, and with Oz being such a cultural phenomenon, seeing it destroyed like this was really effective. In my Wizard of Oz review, I chose movie for this category because of the darkness with which they portrayed the land of the Winkies. That same atmosphere is created throughout this entire movie, so it seems only natural that movies should get the point.